My name is Jessica Livingston. I was a Hokkaido Jet from 2003 to 2006, and now I have the honor of being the executive director for US JETAA. We are a national nonprofit, and our whole reason for existing is to support the 19 chapters of Jet alumni associations across the United States and their subchapters, and also it's to support all of the individual Jet alums that are out there. And there's about 40,000 of us now, and we're in pretty much every industry and sector you can imagine, including the auto industry. And part of what we do here at US JETAA is help our return jets and all of our Jet alumni and our jets that are getting ready to come back figure out what their next pathway might be, and sort of explore different career options. And the auto industry is a really obvious one because of its strong connection to Japan. And so it's an opportunity to use the skills and the cultural and the language competencies you've gained during your JET program experience and apply them to this particular industry. So I'm really excited. We have a wonderful group of JET alum panelists to talk to you tonight. And we're honored that you're here. I'm glad. I hope you learned something. And I'm going to hand it back over to James. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica. We also have another Jet Alumni Association representative with us tonight. Alicia, could you introduce your chapter?
Good evening. I'm Alicia Smith, and I'm the current president of Great Lakes JETAA, which covers Michigan and Ohio. So here in this area, we have such a strong auto presence, and it's really great to see all the culture, the Japanese culture that's grown up around this area. We have a lot of people coming from Japan to live here temporarily, work in the auto industry, and they bring their families. And so they've got there's a Japanese immersion school in the area. There's all sorts of Japanese cultural festivals, and you can go to a doctor who speaks Japanese, and it's just like a whole Japanese community here. And I think it's really great to think about not just the direct auto industry jobs, but also all the other jobs that spring out of that. So I always encourage people, don't dismiss the auto industry. There's a whole lot of different jobs connected to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alicia. And last but not least, would like to hand the ball to Michele. Could you introduce the organization you're representing tonight?
Yes, I am Michele Plattenberger, and I am working closely with the young professionals of the Japan America Society of Michigan and Southwestern Ontario. So I am not a JET alumni, but work closely with Alicia and team to put events on like this and other things as the year progresses. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Michele. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. Just a quick reminder, we're going to have panel discussion followed by breakout rooms. If you have any questions, go ahead and post them in the chat. We're going to try to hold those to the end. If we have time at the end, we'll address those. If not, then you'll have an opportunity in our breakout rooms to ask one of our panelists those questions. So first of all, would like to give all of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, their connection to the JET program and what they do professionally now within the automotive industry. In honor of Japan, I'm going to start in the top right corner and go top to bottom, left to right for the panelists I see. Right now, John, you're in the top right corner. Could you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, James. So my name is John Blosser. I was a JET assistant language teacher in Shizuoka Prefecture in Hamamatsu City from '99 to 2001. After I came back to the U.S., I joined Tsusho America, and my current role within that organization is a group general manager. Tsusho is a Toyota group company. We are not a manufacturer, but we basically handle the supply chain arm of Toyota and its group companies, moving product around the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. The next person I see in that order is Michele.
Yes, thank you. As I said, I'm actually not a JET alumni. However, I did study abroad in college for my first adventure to Japan. And my background is in engineering. I've done things like development work, program management, and more recently, now I'm working in business development. I've been working in the automotive industry for 25, almost 30 years now, both at the OE and supplier level. My career has been integrated in some way, shape, or form, working with the Japanese, although interestingly enough, I have never worked for a Japanese company. So.
Interesting. Thank you, Michele. Alicia?
Well, what was your question?
Oh, sorry, just a quick introduction.
Oh, Alicia's not one of the panelists, actually.
Apologies there, Alicia.
That's
I'm
all
sorry.
right. But
Takeshi.
Okay, that's
But
okay.
we're very glad that she's here.
Here to support.
Next, Takeshi.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. My name is Takeshi. I'm from Quick USA, which is Japanese recruiting company. And you may think, why are you here? So I'm not JET alumni, but long story short, I was born and raised in Japan until when I was 15, and it was very inaka. And then the first foreigner which I met in my city was a JET teacher. And then from that meeting with a JET teacher, changed my life, like opened up my eyes for the world. And then I now living in Texas, and I really feel like you all JET teacher changing the young opportunity. So now I'm working for recruiting company, and my passion is I want to give it back to all the JET community. So I become a corporate sponsor for JET alumni, and I am very passionate to support for all the JET.
And finally, Roy.
Yeah, hi, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Roy Harrison. I am a project development manager at a small company called CSI Group. I'll start with my connection to Japan. High school, I did a 2-week study abroad, or sister city exchange to Iwate Ken. And then went to JET after studying Japanese in college. I was in Saitama from 2004 to 2007. Came back to the United States and entered the Toyota universe, entered CSI Group as an interpreter translator. And I've continued in international roles really for the rest of my career. Yeah, I'm just excited to be here. So thanks so much for taking the time and welcoming me.
Thank you, Roy. And finally, I'll give a short introduction as well. My name is James Shively. I was on the JET program as a Tokyo JET from 2015 to 2018. I always like to say that I was technically a Tokyo JET because my placement was on a small island that's overseen by the Tokyo metropolitan government, but it's actually about 80 miles south of Tokyo, called Izuoshima. Was there from 2015 to 2018, did early departure. So if there are any other early departure jets here, you know the struggle. Once I came back from JET to Nashville, which is where I'm from originally, pretty much got right into the automotive industry. First, as a part of a trading company in sales, was essentially playing the part of like an automotive tier 2 supplier, or tier 3 in some cases. Also did some importing, exporting, some raw materials. And then since 2023, I've been with Nissan North America in the purchasing department, overseeing our supply of primary aluminum. And with introductions out of the way, we can get to our first panelist question. This is a question primarily, I think, for Roy and Takeshi. And that question is, what types of jobs exist in the automotive industry?
I can go in there first if that's okay, Takeshi. Whatever job you can imagine, honestly. Like you obviously have, when you think of the automotive industry, you have the production line workers, the folks who are assembling or welding or working on the line to produce the cars, but there is an entire universe of support that is around that. And Takeshi can speak to that as well. Just some of the folks that I work with, CSI Group very specifically is an electrical design and a mechanical design organization. So we will take the robots that build the cars, and we design the programming language that gets them to move. So there's that sort of work. There's the designing of the elements that hold the parts of the vehicle as it moves down so that they don't drop. And then there's the other side of it. There's, everyone at Toyota has a computer, so you need to have an IT network. You need to have a Wi-Fi system that integrates with the production line and with what are called AGVs, the little sort of dollies that carry things automatically without a person driving it from one end of the factory to the other. There's the other support staff that you see at the front of the office, the sales team, the human resources, the accounting, the finance, things of that sort. So, you have a wide swath of folks that are supporting this singular core business activity of producing cars, and having a Japanese background, having your experience in the JET program is going to serve you very, very well in any of those roles. So you don't need to limit yourself to the STEM experience.
Thank you, Roy. Takeshi?
Yeah, I really agree with Roy. Like most of the time when I meet with the JET alumni and then talking about automotive industry, the first question is, I'm not STEM background. Like I am not engineer, or I'm not like a specific understanding hard skill for that. And I always say like, don't worry about it. As he said, like all of the positions same as other industry. There's an inside sales, there's an HR, or there's a coordinator, which is very good fit from the JET alumni, like a coordinator skill, like a translator or anything else. So it's just industry is called automotive, and even you don't have to be like a really passionate about the car as well. I know so many people who don't understand about the car and just driving. That's totally fine. I see like most of them are like that. So what I want to say, like all of the person, and you don't have to be the engineer, and you don't have to be passionate about the car, something like that.
John or Michele, anything to add?
I would agree with Takeshi-san. I would say I am not a car guy, but I do like logistics. I like the challenge of getting something from point A to point B in order to support our customer.
Yeah, and I would just really like to reiterate, I think their overall message, just to speak to some of the departments at Nissan that I've worked with and seen. We have social media teams, marketing teams, philanthropy teams, a lot of different teams. You don't necessarily need a STEM or an automotive background, or a real passion for cars. I think I'm right there for John. I'm very interested in aluminum, probably more so than the vehicles themselves. Okay, let's move on. Our next question, and I think this will be pretty much open for everyone. We'll maybe start off with John. For those looking to break into the automotive industry, especially in regions like Kentucky or Michigan, what entry-level roles or pathways would you recommend?
Thank you, James. So, as I stated earlier, Toyota Tsusho is a non-manufacturer. Pretty much all our customers are manufacturers. But we do, a typical company will have a sales team. They'll have a purchasing team. They'll have people that are doing quality, production control. So these are all different aspects that are needed within the supply chain. I would encourage people to try to understand, what aspect of the supply chain interests you, or what aspect of a company interests you. that would best suit your skill sets. But most of the time, for people who are hardworking and have a strong sense of desire and passion for the job, the company will train you. So it's more about your interest in the job itself.
Thank you, John. Takeshi, do you have anything to add?
Yes, so if I may say, like Kentucky and Michigan, it sounds like a both similar area, and if it's automotive, it's both similar, but there's quite differences between those two states. So in Kentucky, there is more automotive, but more with factories in there, or warehouses in there. And in Michigan, it's more like sales offices or branches or some design offices in there. So in those differences is like in Kentucky office, it's more like a local employee. Like 95% of the employee or 99% is a local employee, and only a few expat in there. And in Michigan is like an opposite, like 80% is an expat, and only a few local person in there as well. So maybe from those standpoint, like environment where you work in is going to be different. And for the entry level was like there's a factories in Kentucky, so more like a position which is like more closer to the factory, and Michigan is going to be more sales, inside sales, coordinator or supply chain things in there. So even the same industry and closer next to each other, but a little bit tendency is different between those two states.
Yeah, and to kind of build off of that point, I think another piece of advice I might give, because it's the route I took, is there are a lot of entry-level pathways starting off at the suppliers of these companies, right? If you look at Japanese automotive makers in Nashville or all Tennessee and Mississippi, we have Nissan, of course. We have Toyota in Kentucky, Honda, I believe, Columbus. Am I right in that? Headquarters, at least. And they all are really massive companies, and they have a really massive supply base. And a lot of those suppliers are Japanese companies as well. So, I mean, Tennessee, Kentucky, I saw someone in the chat mention Ohio. Ohio as well. I mean, really, you could throw in large swaths of the Southeast. There are a lot of what we call tier 1 or tier 2 suppliers. Tier 1 just means they're the company that's supplying the automaker, your Nissan or Toyota or Honda or whoever. And then a tier 2 might be a company who makes a component or provides some service to that tier 1 company. And there are so many companies like that just throughout the region. At the entry level, that's a really good option. That's what I did. I built up experience in the supply chain, I guess, upstream from Nissan. And once I had experience and had some people who could vouch for me, made some connections, did some networking in the industry, then I was able to segue that into my current position at Nissan. So I think that's an option too, that if you're trying to break into the industry, you should consider. Michele or Roy, do you have any additional thoughts you'd like to add there?
I'm okay. Michele?
I think I'd just like to second what John had said. There's a lot of avenues. It doesn't have to be STEM specifically, although my background is engineering. But when I think about my students that come to me, how can I get into this industry when their major is Japanese language? I ask them, what are you going to do with that? What do you want to do with the Japanese? So think about that. So even at the JET alumni level, or coming back, what are you going to do now with these skill set? Because that skill set is very important that you have. You don't even realize just living abroad. A lot of people can't fathom living away from the town that they grew up in. So that skill set of being able to live away and manage and thrive in a foreign environment is a great skill set that companies want. They want to take advantage of that. So you transfer that skill set, right? And then there's coordination, program management, finance. What are you good at? And you start thinking of that, and then you can take this skill set with your language and that cross-cultural skill set and bring that into any of these, if it's not STEM, any of these other industries that are there as part of the automotive industry. So it's transferable, definitely.
I think that segues very beautifully into the next question, Michele. I'm going to go right back to you. You kind of started to hit on this, but the next question is, what skills are beneficial for someone pursuing a career in the U.S., Japan automotive sector? And how helpful or necessary is Japanese language?
So I think, when I was thinking about this, really, what is critical? And as I tell my students, having an understanding of cross-cultural dynamics and how to navigate in a multicultural team. And this goes beyond Japanese. It's with any other culture other than your own. It's really critical. You need to be able to be fluid with those people around you and work well with others and learn about others and understand others. So it's not just in the Japanese environment, but with any different culture. And beyond that, then really having an understanding of Japanese business etiquette, that's really important because there's a lot of rituals associated with Japanese business etiquette. So having knowledge of that business etiquette and their communication styles, I think this is essential. But the one thing that I tell my students is that being fluent is not as important as being sensitive to the dynamics of communication in and of itself. So most business is done in English. It is true. So getting into a company, especially if you're going to be in the US, a lot of that is done in English. And even your counterparts in Japan, most business is done in English. So they have a good stronghold of the English language, or maybe not. But regardless, put a little effort into studying Japanese culture and Japanese language and sprinkle that into your business communications, and it goes a very long way to building great relationships, whether it's with your internal counterparts or customers or suppliers, etc. All of it works to build a good relationship.
Thank you for that, Michele. I definitely second that notion that the willingness and willingness to be able to work within the Japanese company often is more important than the language itself. I want to toss this over to Roy for a minute. Roy, do you have anything to add to the Japanese language section, but also concerning what skills might be beneficial for someone pursuing a career in the automotive industry?
Yeah, so I broke into this because I do speak Japanese decently well. So that was an easy access point. But CSI overall is a jet-owned company. It's founded by a jet. We have a really long history of hiring returning jets. And to Michele's point, when we see a resume that has the Japanese major, we're also really interested to see what else they did. It's that language plus. And, I think the reason why we've had such great success with jet hires over the past 20-ish years is that there's at least 3, maybe 200, I don't know, but there's 3 really strong values that we see time and time again in these folks. There's a sense of an adaptability. You threw yourself into a foreign country. You might have known the language, you might have not. You certainly didn't know it as well as you needed to. And you adapted, you thrived. You were there for 1 year, you were there for 5 years, but you took that experience and you grew from it. Flip side of that is also resilience, because in that moment of living abroad, no matter how long that moment is, you're pinged with just like stresses all the time. Like, you know, going to Starbucks where the menu's in English and you're trying to use your Japanese, and you can't say the one Starbucks term because they hear your sort of Americanness instead of your Japanese pronunciation. It just beats you down a little bit. So you got to be resilient. And, you know, that sort of resiliency is important too. So the second thing is like leadership, ambition, right? It's a brave thing to move abroad that Michele spoke about. And it really does demonstrate leadership. And you knew that you wanted to grow in some significant way. And you decided that the way that you were going to grow was by going overseas, by going abroad, and living amongst the Japanese and teaching there and holding yourself up in a position of community respect, right? Being a teacher is important in Japan. So you thrived in that environment as well. And then lastly, and I think probably most importantly, is a sense of empathy and sympathy. You know, when you were overseas, people took care of you. Your other teachers at the school, your board of education, your neighbors, they reached out to you. There was, you know, everyone here in this chat has a conversation about some time that a neighbor was great to them when they were in Japan. And flip that around when you're here now, you're in the US or Canada, and you're working now with Japanese expats who are now in the United States, which is very different from Japan. You having that emotional intelligence to sort of see where they are and empathize with them and sympathize with them is going to make you more trustworthy. They're going to open up to you, and they're going to have a more generous business relationship with you. So I think if you're able to at least lean into those three things, that's one of the reasons why we consistently hire Jets. That was long. I'm very sorry.
No. We appreciate the input. Thank you, Roy. Kind of following the segues nice from the last point you were making. This is a question for everyone, but I want to start off with Takeshi. What are the most significant cultural differences between working for Japanese and American automotive companies? And how can professionals navigate these differences?
So what we're gonna say is, especially for the entry-level candidate for the automotive, there's two things which is a benefit for choosing Japanese company. First one is Japanese company have a tradition for train the candidate, train the employees from the scratch. So, but US company hire for somebody who already have exact experience in the job description and go for it, no training. So if you are willing to go into this industry, and if you are willing to have a training to grow, then you have more benefit for starting with Japanese company. And the other thing is, and Japanese company has a tradition of the job rotating inside of the company. So even you start as admin, but in the future, if you're passionate about, oh, I want to be in HR in the future, or I want to go for accounting in the future, something like that, they have an ability of thinking about the employees' future for training them in maybe for some specific area in the future for that, for the different positions as well. So get into there, starting in there, and they're gonna train there. And then once you have some passionate about something, then you can go for that one too inside of the same company. Even doesn't have to change your job for that. So I think that might be a good benefit comparing with Japanese company and American companies.
For sure, especially the rotating of positions and responsibilities is something I've noticed as well. But anybody else like to add more insight to this? John, Roy, Michele?
One thing that I'll mention. So I've worked for Tsusho my whole career, so I've never worked for an American company. But one tenet that's very strong within Toyota and other Japanese automotive makers is the concept of Kaizen. And I think most of you probably know what that means, continuous improvement. But I think this concept, especially for Americans, where everyone crosses the finish line and we all get an award, to hear that something can be improved can sometimes feel like a personal attack. And I think, it doesn't need to be personal, but I think just having that open mindset where everything can be improved. And that's why something even incremental where, okay, we can save 1 or 2 seconds on this process, and that can turn into like hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings is huge to, the labor force and ultimately the customer. So I think that continuous improvement mindset resonates within the automotive industry, and it really drives cost savings, and it really drives operational excellence.
Thank you, John. I think I saw Michele go off mute there as well.
Yeah, so mine is more from a personal perspective. Being a female engineer, working for an American company in Japan, I was an expat on site at this Japanese company, and I can say that there were a lot of cultural differences that I was navigating. It was very interesting. So, very early coming into it, I'm working on my career, moving up in my career. I was part of a collaborative team that included both American expats and Japanese working on site at the Japanese company. We were working on joint development of a vehicle, and we were all sitting, working together. I came in as a manager, which kind of level set things, but it was confusing for my Japanese counterpart because that person had never worked with a female at that level before. So, once they realized my role, there was really no issue. I came in as a manager. They treated me with respect as a manager, but it was very much not normal. So it was interesting navigating that. And trying to be respectful of the culture, yet here I am trying to advance my career aggressively, but trying to be cognizant of the fact that it's not necessarily normal for a female to be at that level, at that age, at the age that I was at that time. So that was interesting. And there's a lot of others that I'll share more as we go through the panel, but that one of the very first things that hit me hard is I need to be cognizant of the cultural differences and dial it back a couple notches with my, aggressive assertiveness. And so big cultural difference there.
Thank you for that insight, Michele. That's, I think, an area where I don't want to speak for Roy or John, but I think we might not be able to give that level of insight. Last, before we move on, would anybody like to add anything else? Roy, do you have any additional thoughts on the subject?
So first off, very specific, I've worked for Marriott International, the hotel company, in their digital marketing space. I've worked for Lexmark, the printer and database company, and also a digital role. And then I've worked for in this Japanese world. First off, the hours are definitely longer in the Japanese world. And part of it's a result of the fact that we're having meetings with Japan just as a core component of our activities. So you just have to be ready for that. I also think that there's just a stronger sense of camaraderie or esprit de corps, like in the Toyota and the Japanese industries that I've been a part of. When I've been part of these other big companies, it seems like you might have a strong leader who's able to push through things, and the boss says so, so you do it. But here I sense more of a sort of sense of we are all in this together. Let's work toward this singular goal together and try to achieve it. So that's just a perspective that I've seen.
Thank you, Roy. Moving on, I want to start off with John on this next question. What are some of the current trends and challenges facing the automotive industry, both globally and in the context of US and Japan?
Thank you, James. So one of the key words that's buzzing around is electrification. And currently we're having a change in the automotive industry that's once every 100 years. So as you know, I'm not sure about the audience, but many of us are still driving the conventional ICE internal combustion engine vehicles. And currently there's a major shift for those vehicles to become electrified. So that's hybrid vehicles, that's plug-in hybrid vehicles, and that's battery electric vehicles. So currently the trends globally are China is in the front runner position, Europe is second, and US is third, and then there's the rest of the world. But the US automotive makers are setting up their infrastructure so that they can produce these electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles. And so, you know, especially with a hybrid, it's quite interesting in that it has the elements of the conventional engine, and it also has an electric battery in the same vehicle. So there's a lot going on with automotive currently, and it's you know, the ways or the times where people say like this is the way we've always done it are totally out the window. Like there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of learning that's going on in our industry. So it's quite an exciting time to be involved in automotive. One interesting example of this within Toyota is Toyota has renamed itself as actually being in mobility, not necessarily in automotive. And they just spent, I think they invested now $900 million in Mobi, which is basically an air taxi company that they're trying to help develop. So this is one aspect of it's not just cars. Cars are certainly, you know, the main focus, but there's other aspects of mobility and transportation that are being investigated as well.
Thank you, John. Takeshi, do you have anything to add?
So from my side, I might be adding for the hiring stages, like for US and Japan. So first of all, not only automotive industry, but in Japan, most of the global company is now suffering for hiring global mindset employees in headquarters in Japan. Like the statistics say like 70% of Japanese company is having difficulty for having global candidates. So it means that traditionally they were sending expat to US to support the businesses in US to be a bridge between Japan and US. But right now they're having limited employees in Japan can send it out from Japan to US. So now what is happening now is it's a challenging for Japanese headquarters, but it's good opportunity for the person who is living in US who wants to be the bridge between Japan and US, because now they have to hire locally in here who can be bridge in there. So it's a challenging for the industry, but it's a good opportunity for that candidate who is living in US.
Thank you for that, Takeshi. From my side, the one item I'd like to add to that list is just kind of the global trend, definitely seeing in North America, of localizing supply versus importing from overseas. And you're seeing it I think pretty much across the world, everywhere, kind of entered a new era of protectionism, tariffs, different regions, and manufacturing wise, trying to get as much of your materials, components and things local as possible. Whereas in the previous few decades, often the move was to import from overseas. I see. I think we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to move on here. This next one, I want to start off with Michele. What role does mentorship play in entering in the industry, and how can early professionals find mentors?
Absolutely. I love talking about this because that's exactly what Japan America Society Young Professionals is all about. Helping you network with industry partners, with people in this area, networking using professional organizations, whatever the affinity group may be in this case, right? Japan America Society. These give you great opportunities to develop and exhibit leadership skills that you would not necessarily get as a new employee early in your career, for instance. So this is what's happening right now, as Alicia started off early talking about maybe before the activity got started, but working on organizing events like the Japanese Job Fair coming up in February. It's the Japan America Society Young Professionals that are actually organizing that. And the great thing about it is they're getting noticed for the activities and things that they're doing. They're learning leadership skills. They're learning program management skills, et cetera, et cetera. So networking with these affinity groups, with these professional organizations are really important, and they can get you that exposure to many different people and lead to great mentorship opportunities as well.
Thank you, Michele. The mentorship question is also one I wanted to toss over to Roy and see what you have to say about.
Yeah, so on the flip side, Michelle's great. Michelle's answer was perfect for getting into the industry. I think once you get into a field, latch on to someone who can be your mentor in that role inside the company. So it's already been said by several people that there is a lot of opportunity to rotate inside the organization. But I've found that Japanese companies, more than the non-Japanese companies that I've been in, really emphasize pairing you up with someone who's going to see that your time is spent in a growth approach. When I first got in, I was paired with a senpai, essentially, and I've stuck with this person for a long time early in my career. I know that Toyota makes it a point to take their new engineers, core to the business, and send them to Japan for 2 to 3 years, just as part of getting them fully understanding how all of the activities coming from Japan are going to then come downstream back to the United States. So find that person, find those people. There are ERGs, employee resource groups, that speak to your specific slice of your interests that you can link up with, and then you can find mentors that way, or just straight up through your organization. So definitely lean on those people, ask questions, raise your hand, volunteer to do all the work to make sure that this happens.
Thank you, Roy. This next question, I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to vent a little bit, and we'll start off again with Michele. Can you share any specific experiences or challenges you faced while working in a Japanese automotive company and what you learned from them?
Yeah, so I think most of my challenges come from a personal nature. So I think the biggest challenge that I thought about, what really all these different challenges, and there's a lot as a female engineer in management, in that role, being in a co-located team. what were the many different challenges. But I think the biggest challenge while I was working with that co-located team was the idea surrounding anything pregnancy or baby. And it was interesting. I'll go a different route with this. I want to share. I remember being shocked to learn, this was only about 13 years ago. I was shocked to learn that I was working very closely with the very first Japanese female at that company to take maternity leave. It's not like this was a new company. This company was like 100 years old back then. And her daughter at the time was like middle school or early high school. So it wasn't that long ago. So it was shocking to hear that she was the first person and the only person to come back, right? So she took maternity leave and came back. And along those same lines, and what's really shocking about it is we had an admin at the time, Japanese girl. She found out she was pregnant and she immediately gave her notice to quit. And, we told her, of course, she didn't have to, but she insisted. And without understanding really what was going on, we thought that maybe it was because, she was using it as an excuse to leave because maybe the foreigners were pushing a little bit too hard. But to round it up quickly, a new girl was hired in, Japanese girl. And much to our chagrin, within less than 2 weeks of her being on the job, she found out she was pregnant and then she gave her notice. And we were like, you don't have to quit. Don't quit. You can stay on. And she's like, no, absolutely. You're not allowed to continue working. Once you know you're pregnant, you must quit. Which we were just dumbfounded with. I couldn't believe it. And then here's me, and it was years later, but I worked up until about 2 weeks before I gave birth, but I'm walking around, going into the quality office or going into the parts crib or going in where to do testing. And I'm, big as a house walking around, and I can just imagine the shock that was going on. But it was, navigating those things as a female and still, yes, I'm there as an expat, but we were there for over 6 years. We're going to live our lives while we're there. So it was an interesting experience. That's just one of many.
Well, if we had more time, I would be interested to hear more. But I do want to give everybody a chance to speak towards any experiences or challenges you've had in the industry. John, I know you and I commiserated about some.
Yeah, certainly the biggest thing, maybe not just for automotive, but any major importer or exporter in the U.S. So during COVID, we had essential and non-essential workers. So the essential were the ones at the factory, not essential, such as myself, more office workers would work from home. And I think during this period, many people started buying things on the internet, and a lot of products started shipping out of China and really clogging the supply chain. Just for an image, the port of Los Angeles at one point had 100 vessels waiting basically in a virtual queue in order to be unloaded. And these vessels are like an airplane, like there's a schedule. And if they're waiting, they can't go back to the origin and, reload. And so there was this, huge holes in the supply chain. So in order to keep the automotive manufacturers and tier 1, tier 2 suppliers going, we had to try to divert ocean containers and truck them in if we could. That was the cheap option. But the more realistic option, because of the massive delays, was we just had to air freight. So this is something that actually we had to basically manage for over 2 years because the congestion was just ongoing during the whole period of COVID. So everything that we knew to be normal as far as lead times, and when something ships from Japan, it's going to get to our factories in this many days, it just went out the window. So this was things have kind of gone back to normal now, but it was certainly biggest challenge during the last 5 years.
Yeah, I still have nightmares about that time period as well. But quickly, Roy or Takeshi, do you have any experiences you'd like to share?
No, I live that shipping trauma as well, so I don't want to
Don't need to relive it. Okay, so kind of finishing up our panelist segment. Final thoughts. Would like to go to everybody. What is your final piece of advice for those looking to step into the Japanese automotive industry? And we'll start off with Roy.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to that sense of adaptability. Particularly if you're not from a STEM background and you don't need to be, just lean into the experience that you had in your jet, adapt some of those lessons that you picked up there. Be proud of your jet experience, and lead with it, run with it, make it the forefront of your resume, and be really proud of what you did, because you did develop transferable skills to commerce, to this world that you're now entering. So I think that's what I would say.
Thank you, Roy. Takeshi?
So I would say for the advice is like please don't put the label for the automotive industry or like have to be an engineer or something like that. Take it off. It's same as the other industry. Like think about what you're passionate about it, what you want for your priority for that. And then for sure you can find something which you can fill out for those priority for, I mean, that your essential important things in the automotive industry as well. So take it off the label and then just focus on what you're interested in, what you're passionate about it, and then connect to the some position in the automotive industry. And then for sure, you're gonna find out something you're interested in there.
Thank you, Takeshi. John?
Yes, I'm kind of talking to my younger self. I wish I had this session way back when, but I think even within the automotive industries, there's a lot of different companies. So maybe a little bit of self reflection about, what kind of company really speaks to you and your values. So like, what is the company's mission statement? Like, what's the company culture? And so a lot of this you can find on the company's websites, but I think a lot of it is really thinking about yourself and who you are as an individual. I think if it's an entry-level position, some of the basics that you all have are teamwork, hardworking, good communicators, ability to communicate with people from a different culture, and just really a strong sense of ownership and getting the work done. So I think those are really transferable skills that any company would be interested in.
Thank you, John. Michele, final advice?
Kind of picking up on what everybody else has already said, putting it all together here, I think look for something that speaks to you. So when you're on one of the job sites or you're working with Takeshi-san to find that job, look at what could possibly interest you. Make sure the company is aligned with your values. Indeed, keep applying for jobs that look interesting to you and keep an open mind. Definitely keep developing your skills. Of course, I'm going to throw that pitch out for use professional organizations to network and get involved. But as people were saying, I took some notes here. As I tell my students when we go on study abroad, one of the first assignments they have is to update their resume and make sure that study abroad stands out. Don't just put it in there as part of your regular schooling or your JET program. Make sure it stands out because they're looking for that, this resilience, this ability, adaptability, etc. And nothing speaks more clearly, louder than having that in your resume clearly stated that you did a study abroad or lived abroad, etc., etc. And then the other piece I'm going to say, just, pun intended, you need to drive your career. You need to be the owner of your career. So you need to drive that. You need to take control of where you want to go, and making sure you have a 3-year plan. It sounds awful, right? But a 3-year plan, a five-year plan, and it's fluid. And we're going to talk about that in January with Takeshi-san, getting ready for the job fair in February. What, when somebody asks you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Can you really answer that question now? But we're going to talk about how important having an answer for that question is in the training session that Takeshi is going to do for us in January.
Thank you, Michelle. I like the plug there for the upcoming training session. I think my final piece of advice would kind of like to tie in a little bit to points that Michelle and Roy both raised about resilience. One thing I don't know if we mentioned enough tonight is the automotive industry can be pretty stressful. There are going to be times where there's maybe a supply crisis, like John mentioned. Everybody in the automotive industry definitely had stress because of that. You're going to be in some high stress situations at times. Resilience is important. And just knowing that whenever you have a challenge, a really stressful situation, you're going to work through it. You're going to have a team of people around you. You're going to figure out how to get through that problem. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and then you're going to learn from it and move on. So I think the resilience and the ability to handle high stress situation is definitely something to keep in mind, and to think about how your experiences on the JET program kind of translate to that when you're selling yourself for a job.